Good afternoon, and welcome to the afternoon session of the Landmarks Preservation Commission, public hearing and public meeting of February 24th, 2026. We are resuming with public hearing item number 11, and I will now turn it over to Corey Harala.
Thank you, Commissioner Ginsburg. Public hearing item number 11 is LPC 26-00756, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 520, Lot 7501. This is a vernacular Queen Anne Revival style school building built in 1886, and the application is to enclose a rear yard canopy structure.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Dina Posner, Preservation staff. The subject property can be seen in the streetscape montage at the bottom of this slide, located mid-block between Varick Street and 6th Avenue. This slide shows a current condition photograph of the front facade on the left and historic tax and designation photos on the right. The property still functioned as a school at time of designation and was later converted to residential use. The scope of the application is to fully enclose a metal and glass canopy adjoining the rear facade. The canopy was previously approved by LPC staff in 2024 and features open sides with glazing at the roof. This block plan shows the variety of building types and heights on the block, as well as the canopy located at the rear of 27 King, which is the larger building shown in purple. The aerial view on the upper left of this slide shows the existing rooftop additions at this property. The larger addition is believed to have come in when the building converted to residential post-designation, and the adjacent greenhouse was approved by LPC staff in 2000. The enclosure of the rear yard canopy is before you today due to the cumulative effect of the rooftop and rear yard additions. This slide also shows that the rear of this building is not visible from any surrounding public thoroughfares. This slide shows a zoomed-in plan view of the canopy and then the existing and proposed plan view. The proposal is to enclose the three sides of the canopy utilizing glazed panel walls. This is an existing rear building elevation with the open canopy as previously approved by LPC staff, and a side-by-side existing and proposed elevations showing the proposed enclosure. This is existing and proposed section drawings. And this shows details as well as material and finish information. And finally, an existing condition photograph of the canopy on the left and a proposed photo montage on the right. That concludes the presentation, and the applicant is here for any questions.
Are there any questions? There doesn't seem to be anyone in the room. Just checking who wants to speak. So we'll turn it over to Intergovernmental and Community Affairs, Elizabeth Lee.
Those joining via Zoom who wish to speak, please use the raise hand function. You'll be promoted to panelist, after which we ask you to unmute, state your name for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Seeing none, I'll note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 recommends approval.
Okay, any other questions? So let's see here. Commissioner Jefferson, can you close the hearing, please?
So move.
And Commissioner Goldblum, can you second? All in favor? Any opposed? So Commissioner Goldblum, can you start on this one, please? Commissioner
Concur.
Commissioner Tembe,
Agreed, appropriate.
Commissioner Wilder,
Appropriate.
Commissioner Mayhead,
Appropriate.
Commissioner Chen.
Same here.
Thank you all. Commissioner Goldblum, can you read the?
Regarding 27 King Street, the application in the Charlton King Van Dam's Historic District, the application is to enclose rear yard canopy structure. I note The building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Charlton King Van Dam Historic District. I recommend approval, finding the proposed work will not eliminate or damage any significant architectural features, that the work will not be visible from any public thoroughfare, that the scale and materials of the rear yard addition created by enclosing the existing metal canopy with the glazing system will be in keeping with the scale and materiality of greenhouse structures often found adjoining the secondary facades of buildings, that the modest size of the addition within its deep lot will not overwhelm the neighboring properties or detract from the central green space, that the cumulative amount of added bulk created by the rear yard addition in conjunction with the existing rooftop addition and greenhouse will not overwhelm this very large building, and that the work will not detract from the special architectural or historic character of the Charlton King Van Dam Historic District.
Commissioner Jefferson, can you second it?
So second.
Mark, can you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Ginsburg,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum, Commissioner Quimby,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson, Commissioner Mahan,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilder.
Aye.
7 in favor, none opposed. The motion passes.
Thank you. That's approved. Let's move on to the next item.
Right, the next item is public hearing item number 12, LPC 26-06533. This is an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 531, Lot 7503, 354 Bowery in the NoHo Historic District Extension. This is a stripped Italianate-style multiple dwelling with store building built circa 1832 and altered circa 1854. The application is to construct a cantilever over the building and landmark site associated with an adjacent new building to be constructed outside of the historic district boundaries. And before the applicant begins, just a few notes on review of a cantilever. You know, in terms of the past commission history with these, we have reviewed and approved probably, I don't know, half a dozen of these by now. Some of them have been over individual landmarks. Some of them have been over buildings in historic districts. But I think generally the same factors are considered in each case. So the height of the cantilevered portion of the building that's otherwise off the site, the height of that above the street, sort of the gap or the distance between the roof of the landmark building and the bottom of the cantilevered portion itself. And in thinking about both of those, kind of taking in, you know, what kind of visibility there may be that you can actually observe the two things at once. Can you see the landmark and the cantilever at the same time? Is it something where you can only have to crane your neck up pretty high and you don't see the landmark anymore by the time you see the cantilever? Things like that. You've also considered the sort of projection of the cantilever, its extent and its depth crossing the sight line itself, and whether that has sort of an abrupt nature or a gradual stepping nature. Things like that have all been factors that you all have considered. So I just wanted to sort of set that up for this application. I'm not sure if, Mark, you want to add anything to that?
No, just that this is one of those applications where we are only looking at the cantilever. The building itself is off the landmark site, so they're just projecting over this.
Does it matter that contributing building that is kind of?
Well, in both cases, we're looking at the effect on the important architectural features of the building. So in this case, the building it's cantilevering over is a building in a historic district, a contributing building in a historic district. So you would view that the same as if it's an individual land.
All right, so with that, we'll turn it over to the applicant.
Hello, my name's Chris Fogarty, Fogarty Finger Architects. Everyone hear me? Thank you for letting me be here today. And I guess, oh, yes. Sorry. So our site is located on the northwest corner of Bowery and Great Jones Street. It sits on the boundary of the NoHo Historic District Extension. See it here. And it sits in the newly rezoned Soho NoHo special district and has been upzoned to a M16 R10 district. It is actually part of a much bigger zoning lot that includes the new office building that was put together for the new office building at 360 Bowery, which is on the northern corner of the block, and this is our project on the southern corner. The two buildings, and this is the little cantilever here, and we'll come into that in more detail, but the two buildings are in between 360 and our building on Bowery. This is just looking at the site, looking up Bowery northwards, and this is the site here. This building's to remain. This little building here, the 1-story, and there's a 3-story building here. And this is zoning out, just hatching out where the development's happening. This is looking across from the street. It's a montage. Again, this is the 1-story building. These little buildings here coming out. These are the two buildings in the landmark district. And this is 360. This is the office building, and that's at the northern corner. And again, just showing the development site itself. This diagram shows on the left-hand side the as-of-right scheme with a sheer lot line wall going up against the adjacent to the building, and on the left, sorry, and on the right it shows the cantilevered version. The site is this cantilever adds a small amount to the project. It's about 5,000 square feet, 5,200. Adds about 1,300 square feet of more of affordable floor area, which translates with the way that we've laid out the apartments to about 2 or 3 extra affordable units. We're not trying to max out the air rights. The zoning lot can actually deliver about 7,000 more air rights, and we've left those off the table just because we wanted to keep the floor heights higher and everything else. These are some examples of previously approved cantilevers. You know, the more successful ones, I think, as Corey mentioned, have been the ones that have been more coherent to the building design. The X-Star is perhaps maybe one of the biggest ones that we've seen, which is over at Individual Landmark. But this is Dickey House, which steps up down in the financial district, and this is Flatiron. And sometimes, you know, where the language of the building and the facade and tying the cantilever together has been one of the things that makes some of these more successful than others. We sort of looked around the district, of course, and how planes and changes in facade depth happen is sort of interesting. The corbel and bracket is very much a part of that sort of cast iron language and that historic district. We thought that was a kind of interesting precedent. So here's the elevation looking at from Great Jones. The building has a 1-story retail base, then it turns to 2 levels of single story, and then transitions to a double-story language. It sets back on the 14th floor, and we have a dormer that goes up. But instead of just continuing that dormer, we have a deeply recessed. It recesses about 3 feet between the piers to create a kind of visual break between the base of the building and the dormer going up. And then we have a similar thing happening on the Bowery side, where the dormer goes up here. This is the as of right on the left, and this is with the cantilever. And so that vertical break happens on Bowery. We take that, when we're looking at the cantilever, we took that same idea, that double height sort of corbel bracket, and brought it round to interlock and step the massing of the cantilever. And so just a little bit of information about the cantilever itself. It sits 10 feet back. It's in plane with the setback of the facade. At its deepest, it's about just shy of 8 feet deep. It's not a huge cantilever. And we start it very high up. It's 70 feet above the adjacent buildings, or 71 feet. So, you know, that's a before and after. This is looking at an elevational view, not really ever going to see it like this, but this is without the cantilever, and this is with. Go back and forth like that. And this is just comparing the two side by side. Whoops. So this is looking north again. This is that view looking. So from here, obviously, you don't see much of the cantilever at all. It's all covered. But you can see the Bowery, further up the Bowery is some 16-story buildings. Material-wise, I know we're not really here to talk about the facade of the building, but we're thinking it's a light porcelain or precast facade with maybe a terracotta base and a glass storefront. We spent quite a lot of time thinking about windows and in the historic district. And, you know, there's a lot of beautiful flat arch cast iron buildings. We kind of inverted that flat arch and rotated 180 degrees. So we get the soft radius at the base, which kind of softens those windows that start at the 4th floor and up. And then this is looking south down the Bowery. So this is on the left is the sort of as of right scheme, and you can see that the lot line wall just goes straight up and turns to windows at the 12th floor. This is with the cantilever, and you can begin to see that kind of heavily detailed facade that's happening there as it steps its way out from the sheer wall. And again, that's working with the dormer in tandem to create this kind of language that's happening there. It's a little hard to see in this image. This is closer up, and again, looking at that that lot line wall without the cantilever. And then this is with the cantilever. And I think here you can see a little bit more visually how it's kind of, that kind of concept of a corbel or bracket is being kind of used. And then this is one with and one without next to each other. And then this is just looking close up. So this is actually what you would see if you're standing on the street with a camera. I mean, we probably see something different with your eyes. But you can see here, this is the two landmark buildings or buildings in the landmark district. And this is the lot line wall. And then, of course, this is that stepping out and the cantilever happening there. So kind of transitioning from the lot line to the cantilever. And then we just have a series of images looking further up the Bowery, looking back south, and this is with and without. Again, it gets the further up you go, the less impact it has. This is looking from East 4th Street, and so on the left is without the cantilever. So this is looking west, and you can see here, this is with it there. And then this is looking from Lafayette. And again, you can see the difference between with and without. Of course, if anything gets approved at 375 Lafayette, this view will probably disappear. And that is it. So I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Commissioners, Commissioner Jefferson.
So on page 22, the reason for the cantilever is either to enlarge the room size, or is it purely architectural in form?
The reason for the cantilever? I think it's to, hello, okay, we'll stay here. I think it's to, it helps the floor plate, obviously, when it gets to the upper levels. We did like the way that we had this counterpoint of the massing going on. So architecturally, we preferred it, but it obviously has value to our client, and we were able to produce more inclusionary housing as a benefit too. This is a rental building, not a condo building.
It becomes a bay window. What does it become? Just an enlargement of the room? Of the room making? What does it do to the space itself?
Inside. Well, they have these beautiful corner windows. So that cantilever piece actually sit in these kind of framed, have these deep frames around you, and they happen they happen on the Bowery and they happen on Great Jones as well. So they're happening. You've got on up there, you've got this series of apartments that have this very deep recessed windows and frames.
Commissioner Goldblum?
I have it here. So this is that detail, but I'm going to just try and explain what that is on maybe this image. Yes. So these two buildings, and you can see here with 360 is probably easiest to see it. You can see how 360 goes perpendicular here, but the gap between 360 and the neighboring building, actually, I think is like 30 inches at its base and it tapers up to 6 or whatever. So we have the opposite issue going on our side, which is it starts off at 6 and it tapers out to 30. So we've got to fill this gap between the building. And so that's what this detail is showing. So we have a sort of, this is a metal panel that would be perpendicular to the lot line that would fill the gap. And then we return that in spandrel glass to kind of create a little bit of a corner detail and then bring that round so that this window actually becomes usable on those lower floors. When it gets above the building next door, it turns into a fully fledged corner window.
I have a question. If we could go back to the photo. Right. On the northern of the two historic buildings, is that a sign up there now?
Billboard.
And I presume that when you were done, that billboard will be valueless and will be taken down?
We don't control those buildings, but
Right.
I'm not going to make that promise because these billboards seem to have a life of their own.
Thank you. So we may have more, but any other questions? So we'll go to public hearing, and I have a sign-in sheet for Rachel Morrow. So can you come up and give your testimony, please?
I can. Can everyone hear me? Perfect. So my name is Rachel Morrow. I actually live on Great Jones Street, and I'm here representing my entire building, which is 40 Great Jones Street. So we're just a few buildings down from the site. I attended the community board landmarks hearing on this, so I've pretty well familiar with the project. What I wanted to say is that the corner on which this gigantic building will be built, which is right on the corner of Great Jones and Bowery, was carved out of the low-lying NoHo Historic District extension. And as you all know, it's going to literally abut historic buildings that are in this historic district, and it's going to dwarf them, but it's as of right. Community Board 2, in support of its designation of this district in 2008, expressed grave concerns that this parcel would see outsized development that would not be harmonious with the district. And that is exactly what's happening here. The applicant has admitted that their design makes no effort whatsoever to complement the character of the NoHo Historic District extension that their building borders. And there are no examples of cantilevers of this type anywhere in NoHo. I would also argue, given the question that one of the commissioners just asked as to what is the reason for the cantilever, it seems to me that the reason for the cantilever is so that they can make the building larger and make more money. So I would say that approval of this cantilever would really set a disturbing precedent for this type of a cantilever in NoHo, and I would urge the commission to reject it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the room who wants to testify? Since I don't see anyone, we'll now go to remote testimony, and Stephen Thompson or Elizabeth Lee will be taking us through that.
Those joining via Zoom who wish to speak, please use the raise hand function. You'll be promoted to panelist, after which we ask you to unmute, state your name for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. The first speaker will be Dina Tassawinter.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Dina Tass-Winter for Village Preservation. I want to note that our Executive Director, Andrew Berman, intended to speak to this project, but he's otherwise engaged at a Board of Standards and Appeals hearing on a different project. So I'm speaking on behalf of both him and our organization. Village Preservation strongly opposes this proposal to cantilever an aggressively out-of-context building over the NoHo Historic District extension. Cantilevers encroaching onto landmark sites are extremely rare across the city and unprecedented in the NoHo Historic District and extensions. The very few allowances granted for cantilevers over landmark buildings have been almost exclusively in Midtown or the financial district over individual landmarks. This is not Midtown or FIDI, and allowing a 300-foot tall tower to literally hang over the historic district would certainly detract from the collective sense of place for which it was designated. The proposed building itself is gargantuan and will overwhelm and loom over historic NoHo, even without the cantilever. While we know we cannot comment directly on the rest of the building's design or massing within the scope of this LPC hearing, allowance for even more square footage for this building and encroachment into the historic district should absolutely not be permitted. There is no good reason to allow this intrusive cantilever, and the precedent it could have the power to establish is disturbing, to say the least. Though not directly a landmarks issue, the applicant has argued that the cantilever will increase the amount of housing and affordable housing this project may include, but this amounts to an increase in quote unquote affordable housing by a mere 2 to 3 units at most. And it is worth noting that the non-cantilevered version of the building already contains significantly more housing than the original projections for the Soho NoHo rezoning made for this site. There is therefore no need to try to shoehorn just a little bit more into this corner with an unprecedented and inappropriate cantilever. Thank you.
The next speaker will be Emma Bartley.
Hello, my name is Emma Bartley, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. While the physical impact of the proposed cantilever may be relatively limited, HDC objects to cantilevered encroachments in principle. Allowing cantilevered additions over landmark buildings or historic districts establishes a troubling precedent that undermines the integrity and autonomy of historic structures. Even when visually minimal, these additions erode the clarity of historic form and should be avoided. Thank you.
The next speaker will be John Graham.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Graham for the Victorian Society, New York. We strongly oppose this proposal to construct a cantilevered structure over 354 Bowery, which encroaches upon the historic district and the landmark site. The Italianate exterior of this 19th century historic building remains largely unchanged, and it is integral to the architectural character of the NoHo Historic District extension. The proposed cantilever of the new building at 56 Great Jones Street interrupts the historic streetscape surrounding 354 Bowery, overwhelming the building and impinging on the surrounding space. The massive scale of the cantilever would overwhelm and obscure 354 Bowery, and the cantilever makes the proposed design even more incompatible with the adjacent historic district and the historic NoHo neighborhood. We believe that this type of cantilever is never appropriate over historic buildings, and we urge the Commission to take the same position. This proposal, and others like it, do not protect or complement historic architecture. Rather, they are parasitic structures, building historic district space that the owner of the landmark is likely unable to make use of, while using the presence of the landmark to provide perpetual light, air, and views for occupants of the non-landmark building. It advantages the owner of the non-landmark property while providing no benefit or enhancement to the designated building, the historic district, or the public. This is exactly the opposite of what the Landmarks Law is intended to achieve. Thank you, Commissioners.
The next speaker will be Pete Davies.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Pete Davies. I'm a longtime Soho resident, living for over 45 years, just a few blocks away from this location at 354 Bowery in NoHo. I strongly oppose this application and urge you to follow the lead of Community Board 2. The cantilever proposed for this massive new development on the Bowery is without precedent in the NoHo Historic District extension. Such architecture is not found within any of the nearby NoHo or Soho protected districts. The plan for an aerial incursion from an adjacent non-landmarked structure into and hovering over the historic district is put forward without any context for the area, and it is totally inappropriate. Approval of this plan would set a dangerous and potentially slippery precedent for this and other historic districts all across New York City. Therefore, in order to preserve the integrity of our cherished and historically important landmark districts, this proposal must be denied. Also, attention needs to be paid to the numerous fines that have been levied by the city against 354 Bowery for numerous reasons. I thank you for your good consideration and urge you to deny this application. Thank you.
The next speaker will be Giorgio Bavenzi.
Good afternoon. I'm Giorgio Bovenzi and live and work on East 4th Street on the block just north of the proposed development. And I speak today on behalf of my building as well. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I oppose the application. I have submitted my written testimony to which I remand to the commission and would like to present the following highlights from it. 1. The cantilever intrudes into the historic district and is incompatible with the district character. This is not a case where the new construction merely sits adjacent to a historic district. Instead, this is a case where a non-contextual building reaches across the district boundary to occupy the airspace above a protected improvement. Section 25-307B explicitly requires the commission to evaluate the relationship between the proposed work and neighboring improvements. So what's the relationship here? The cantilever does not exist in a vacuum. I submit that the commission is permitted to consider the building from which the cantilever extends when evaluating the cantilever's impact on the district. And that building is outrageously inappropriate, and this should be part of the commission's finding. 2, approval would create a dangerous precedent in NoHo by establishing that developers of buildings outside historic districts may extend their structures into the districts via cantilevers. 3, the cantilever is unnecessary, as admitted by the developer itself. 4, and this is particularly important, this application should be evaluated in connection with the simultaneous proposal at 375 Lafayette Street, which is scheduled to be heard by this commission on March 10. The two proposed towers at 56 Great Jones being heard today and 375 Lafayette at the west end of the same Great Jones block together would bracket the historic block between structures approximately 3 to 5 times the height of the existing 5- and 6-story fabric, creating a canyon effect that would destroy the streetscape character that justified the district's designation. The final environmental impact statement released in October 2021, the FACE, for the Soho-NoHo rezoning, studied development capacity in the aggregate, not on a parcel-by-parcel basis. The FACE emphasized neighborhood context and minimizing the effects of new developments and enlargements on neighboring buildings. The FACE entrusted this commission with the authority to enforce that contextual mandate. This commission should not approve the cantilever at 56 Great Jones while a 375 Lafayette Street application is still pending, because doing so would concede the eastern end of Great Jones Street to out-of-context development before the cumulative impact on the block has been adequately considered. Commission also has the authority to do so under 6 NYCRR 617.3, which provides that related actions should not be reviewed in isolation and to avoid underestimating their combined environmental impact. Thank you very much for your attention.
The next speaker will be Mitchell Grubler.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Mitchell Grubler. I chair the Landmarks Committee of the Bowery Alliance of Neighbors. Back in 2008, when the NoHo extension was being considered, the Community Board urged the Commission not to allow these carve-outs, including the one we're discussing now. But with the carve-out, we now get a 300-foot, 25-story building towering over the Bowery and the historic district. It's not a good neighbor. It doesn't respect the historic district in any way. Neither the fenestration or the textures or the coloring or the massing of the building have any consideration of the historic district. Therefore, the cantilever should not be a reward granted to this developer. And I'm also very concerned about this 300-foot building being constructed right next to the 1832 landmark and the stabilization of that landmark building. Thank you.
Anyone else who wishes to speak, please use the raise hand function. The next speaker will be Valerie De La Rosa.
Great. Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Valerie De La Rosa. I'm the chair of Manhattan Community Board 2, and I'm speaking on behalf of the board this afternoon. This application seeks an approval for a cantilever that is for a large new residential building, and I won't go on about the application. You've heard enough about it, but the basis for CB2's denial is pretty straightforward. The building is proposing to project into the landmark district, makes no historic reference to the district it borders, and it is a large modern structure in a carve-out parcel that relates in no meaningful way to the surrounding 5-story tenements. There's been no effort to harmonize in massing, materiality, or architectural language. And second, approval would set a disturbing precedent and would allow a building outside a designated historic district to physically encroach into that district for additional floor area. This project is already fully permitted as of right. It already complies with MIH requirements and provides substantial affordable housing without the cantilever. There is no hardship and there is no preservation benefit created by this intrusion. District boundaries exist for a reason. If a non-contributing building may extend into a landmark district simply because it borders it, then the boundary itself becomes negotiable. For those reasons, CB2 recommends denial. Thank you very much.
The next speaker will be Dino Butrovic.
Yes, good afternoon, and thanks for the opportunity to speak. I am Dino Butrovic, and I am also speaking on behalf of my building, which is on East 4th Street. And I would say also on several more residents who are informally grouped in a neighborhood group called Historic NoHo. We strongly oppose the proposed cantilever on Bowery Street. I think that there are so many reasons which have been thoroughly exhausted before me already by the speakers before, so I really don't need to add much more to the reasoning. But I just want to emphasize once again that this cantilever will present visual intrusion into historic space. So it is definitely not something that can be aesthetically accepted. This cantilever is unnecessary. There is no hardship. There is no really any other social function that it performs. I think the argument from the developer and the architect is disingenuous. about the need for having that. And I think that the only reason one can think about is that two huge buildings on the sides, which were unfortunately, and I would say shamelessly, carved out of the natural boundaries of the historic district, they have already committed so much damage to the neighboring two landmarked buildings. The buildings are not landmarked themselves, but they are buildings in the landmark area. That this would appear as a minor thing on the top of that, so it would sort of deliver coup de grace, to the buildings which are already gone. I hope that we are not there, that we need to apply this type of reasoning, and I hope we'll really, think carefully about not creating this type of precedent in the neighborhood. I think that NoHo is under development attack. Two huge buildings are already on the corners, between the two historic blocks on East 4th Street and Great John Street. The third one, which is actually on the protected landmark parking lot, is being planned. And I hope that this commission will do something to protect the neighborhood and historic neighborhood and landmark neighborhood. Thanks very much.
The next speaker will be Tina Ai.
Oops, can you hear me? Hi, thank you for your time and tell my neighbors trying to protect the historic NoHo district. As a resident of Great Jones Street for now 16 years, I'm just speaking to oppose the cantilever that would hang over landmark 354 Bowery. 56 Great Jones, it's already this ginormous 25-story tall building that's going to tower over all of these really narrow 7-story buildings on Great Jones Street. So, I know unfortunately we can't do anything about the size of the building, but we can still protect 354 Bowery. So ultimately, this extra air grab cantilever idea, it just adds further insult to injury. So I hope that you guys can please set a precedent for all future developments, just showing that we will still protect landmark buildings no matter what. Thank you so much for your time.
The next speaker will be Terrell Wynn.
Hi, I'm Andre Mead, Tara Owen's husband. We live at 48 Great Jones. We are neighbors to the historic building that this new building proposes to cantilever over. And we strongly recommend that the cantilever not be approved for all the reasons spoken earlier. Personally, we will lose many windows. We'll have to reconfigure our air conditioning system. But the bigger issue is if this building is allowed to encroach in the NoHo historical district, I just think it makes a joke of the historical district. This is a protected zone for a reason, and I don't think it should be allowed to, the building should be allowed to encroach onto it. And if we think about the bottom line, the only attribute this building offers is a handful of affordable housing units somewhere in the city. And I think it's important to just reflect on how we got here. So I used ChatGPT to ask how many building code rules are there in New York City? And the most powerful AI systems in the world said there's too many to meaningfully count. There's no single number, as building regulations are spread over massive multi-layered systems of overlapping codes and agencies. There's a 1938 code, 1968 code, 2022 code, all still enforced. And the bottom line, according to ChatGPT, is New York City building regulation is genuinely one of the most complex regulatory environments in the world, with a sheer volume of overlapping codes, archaic rules still enforced, inconsistencies between neighborhoods, make it significantly harder and more expensive to build housing. So I think the clear bottom line is we have a system here where developers cannot make money building affordable housing units. The right way to get affordable housing units in the city is to revisit this set of rules, work with developers, and figure out a way where they can make money. This is the direction San Diego took, and it bore fruit. Right now, developers lose money on affordable housing, so of course we don't see any If we leave this situation as it is, we're only going to get more high-end buildings like we're seeing here in NoHo. The wrong way to get affordable housing is to keep this dysfunctional system, allow developers to essentially bribe us all with a few affordable housing units, often far afield from the developments they want. And in parcel, they get permission to build mammoth buildings in protected neighborhoods that are totally out of character for areas like NoHo. I think this cantilever should be rejected, and for all the reasons stated before, and people preserve NoHo for a reason. I think the character of this important neighborhood should stay intact. Thank you.
The next speaker will be Chenalt Spence.
Members of the Commission and Madam Chair, thank you for this opportunity to speak. I'm Chenalt Spence, the Chair of the Landmarks Committee for Community Board 2. In addition to what Valerie said, the Chair of the Board, I would like to speak about the precedent here. We were actually quite surprised that such an application even came to us. They gave numerous examples of cantilevers over landmark buildings. In all of these cases, they were individual landmarks, and the building received quite good payments for it, so they got an advantage to it, and it did not disturb a neighborhood, and it was determined that the building was not disturbed. In this case, a totally alien building has asked to, if you will, invade the landmark district, and that which invades, as well as the building, has absolutely no historic reference, and we've heard a great deal of testimony that it, in fact, harms a great deal the landmark district. Thank you.
Anyone else who wishes to speak, please use the raise hand function. Seeing none, a note for the record that Assemblymember Deborah Glick recommends denial.
Does the applicant want to respond to any of the comments?
Yes, I think, you want to say something? I like it when Valerie says something. It's much better
The
to me.
design comes later. I just wanted to speak a little bit, Valerie Campbell from HSF Kramer, about the precedent issue. There haven't been very many cantilevers. I don't think, and the first one, I believe, was approved well over a decade ago, if not longer. So I don't think there has been a rush for cantilevers generally in over landmarks, and there has been the Flatiron example is one that occurred over in a historic district, so it's not just limited to Midtown or FIDI. There were some comments in the public testimony that suggested that environmental review was required, but I think the commissioners all know that environmental review is not required for landmarks determinations. It is required in connection with zoning actions, and this is not a zoning action. There was also a suggestion that somehow the historic buildings are not benefiting from this transaction. But in fact, all of the historic buildings within the district that are part of the zoning lot did benefit from it. They were able to transfer their development rights to sell light and air easements and to allow for the cantilever easement. And so that is a benefit that is accruing to the owners of these historic buildings. I'll let Chris talk a little bit, respond to some of the design issues.
Yes, I think there was a lot of talk about the size of the building, and yet the size is not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about the cantilever and the impact it has on the buildings below them. And I think, you know, for me personally, if I look at this slide here, The lot line wall on the left-hand side is fine. It's a standard New York City lot line wall. There are many types and forms. I think having this form that actually comes on this other side of the building actually helps tie all three of the facades together in a way that wouldn't happen otherwise, and creates visual interest, but it really is so much higher than the buildings next door that it has very little impact from people walking down the Bowery or from many parts of the historic district.
Commissioner Goldblum has a question.
You had said earlier that you have, that the building as currently configured is about 7,000 square feet or so under built.
Yeah.
If this application wasn't approved, why couldn't you just take that and plop it somewhere else?
On our building or on the site? The way we would have done it is just add an extra 2 floors. We have high floor to ceiling height, so we thought that the beneficiary of having like higher ceiling heights would be better than actually getting the.
Right, so if this weren't permitted, you'd still be able to get those 2 or 3 extra units. You just have a little lower floor to floor heights.
If the client chose to go down that path, I'm not sure they would. They might just decide not to.
Okay.
Do it, but I think it definitely is advantageous to have this floor area in the building.
Got it. Thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions?
One more thing. This was for staff. Extel, Cantilever Art Students League. Was that on 74-711? Were any of these 77 Greenwich? I know Flatiron House wasn't. That was a district approval, right? That was a building in the historic district. None of them were 74-711s. Great, thanks.
I'd just like to follow up on something that Corey said, and I think as Valerie noted, there's been very few of these over time, and Commissioner has treaded very lightly in looking at these, and it really is a site-specific analysis of how it is perceived, and that is really what you're being asked to look at here, is that does this detract from the sort of architectural features of these buildings, of the district? I mean, this is a little bit odd because the district, these 2 buildings are the sole representative of that district, and they're going to be surrounded by 2 buildings, you know, that aren't in the district, very tall. But the law still would ask you, does this detract from the significant architectural features of this building? So that's really what you're looking at, is that simple question, and it's, you know, it's very site specific and how it's perceived. Yeah.
These 2 buildings are off the vertical, right now. They're going to collapse at some point. They have to be fixed.
Oh.
Something has to be done.
Hopefully not. Okay, yeah.
So what, and they're historic. What happens next? What's the next step?
That's not really the issue before you. I mean, there's a big building next to them on one side, and there will be a new tall building on the other side. So these buildings will be supported by new construction on both sides. So that's not the issue before you today. The issue before
I know,
you.
but that's the future. That's thinking ahead. What could happen?
I mean, I think that these buildings with these shims and the fact that they're now being, you know, taller buildings next to them are probably in a better shape than they would be without construction next to them. But that's really beyond my lawyer's degree.
Well, it does take off the wind load that they would otherwise potentially get on the exposed party walls. So the new buildings may help preserve them in that sense.
But 10 years from now, we have to think about it.
To pay. This guy's responsibility to make sure.
Okay, we ready to close the meeting? Does anyone have another question? Okay, Commissioner Tumbe, can you close the meeting, please?
So move.
And Commissioner Wilder, can you second?
I second.
And Commissioner Mahan, can you start it? Oh, sorry, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Commissioner Mahan, can you start, please?
Sure.
Thank you for the careful presentation with clear visualizations. Very helpful. I appreciate the testimony, from the public and community board and interested stakeholders. It's of course, it's not a new building. It's inside a historic district. It's not an alteration to a historic district. It, in some sense, feels minor, but of course, I recognize that preservation and this body, is oftentimes the the kind of field upon which we work to unravel all these different sort of forces of modernization, development, societal sort of issues, housing, and so forth. That being said, our purview is fairly narrow. So if we think about the specificity of this particular site, we have a very peculiar historic district boundary with this little finger that reaches out to the Bowery. So I think that's quite relevant here, that we have sort of just this expression of these two, small townhouses on the Bowery, as opposed to a kind of, continuous row with greater consistency or something of that nature. I would also note that the historic district generally is quite varied. There's a mixture of scales, style, era, and even contemporary architecture within it. So, given that context, I find that the proposed cantilever is actually quite modest, given the scale of the historic district, given the precedents that were illustrated in the few precedents that there are that have been approved. I think that it's quite high and it's subtle in its impact to the historic district and these two buildings that we can see on the Bowery in particular. I know some cantilevers are bigger, some cantilevers are smaller that have been approved, but this is, we as a body make these judgment calls about scale and proportion all the time. We decide sometimes, a rear yard addition is too big. Sometimes it's, just right. And I do think that this is subtle given its context. And I would even submit that, the kind of contemporary abstraction of Corbelline or brackets is clever and perhaps even improves the new building. So I can support this proposal.
Commissioner Goldblum?
Thank you. I don't agree. There's been a lot of talk about precedents, both this being a precedent and the precedents for this, as thin as they might be. So I start, as maybe sometimes I do, by looking at the precedents that they propose and trying to evaluate the project in light of those precedents. I think that the Art Students League one, I think, was a bad idea. I voted against it at the time, and I think it's come out in such a way that I feel good about my vote. The 77 Greenwich Street, it's a totally different site. I mean, the 77 Greenwich Street project is for a small brick building that was kind of on the tip of a very narrow block that was more like a Flatiron type block, where you approach the building as a three-dimensional object and you approach the tower behind it as a three-dimensional object, both of which face this kind of narrow tapered end of the block. And so the cantilever is read over the building in a way that it interacts with the building in a very active way to kind of talk to that very unusual urban condition. And the Flatiron House building is totally different because it's in a district, first of all. And this is kind of traversing a district boundary. And when you look at the Flatiron House building, there's enough of a setback before the cantilever occurs where you really do perceive the side of the Flatiron House building as a party wall building that has a kind of very typical relationship with its neighbors, lower and higher, that other buildings on that same block have. So I don't think that any of the three examples for me sell the idea of this particular cantilever. Then I think about, yeah, I agree that the aesthetic impact of this little bay window deal is pretty minimal. And I certainly would say that it's high up enough that, it's higher, the space between the street and the roof of the building is considerably smaller than the space between the roof of the building and the start of the cantilever. So there's no question that proportionally it's relatively unobtrusive. But the problem for cantilevers for me is that they break a kind of urban morphology. You see it in New York all the time. A little building next to a big building. A mid-block building next to a smaller mid-block building next to a bigger corner building. And the way that works, that kind of, I think of like Delirious in New York, the kind of the sides, those kind of weird juxtapositions, but they all occur in a rhythm and with a kind of an intrinsic system that relates to the party wall, that relates to the lot line, that, you can have a big ass building right next to a little one, and you'll see this nasty blank side, but that's part of the city. And you're used to that. And once you kind of convert this and you break that line with a building kind of elbowing over another one, even if it's a little bit, it breaks that typology, it breaks that rhythm. So even if it's relatively small in proportion, relatively unobtrusive, I think there's something wrong about that breaking of the rhythm. I feel a lot less guilty about this. We all need housing, we all need low-income housing, but I don't know if we need 9.5-foot clear ceilings or 10.5-foot clear ceilings. I don't feel like this would deprive the city of any housing by removing it, so I don't feel terribly guilty about having a somewhat negative take on this incursion. And I think the original sin here, of course, was the drawing of the district lines, which was the cause of this, and I think that that's something that we should think about when districts come around. I think that the reason these kind of boundaries are drawn is because, the city wants to kind of create development sites, which is great. We all need development sites. But it comes from a distrust of the Landmarks Commission's ability to approve significant new buildings within districts, which we do all the time. Look at Flatiron House, approved in a district, big building. We approved it, and it's a good building. So I think that when we come to look at, at drawing boundaries, we should think about not necessarily excluding development sites, but including them where it makes sense from a kind of district experience, which is how we determine districts, and trying to, create, the fact that this building doesn't interact in any aesthetic way with the historic district doesn't have to, but I think we would be having a different conversation if it had to. And I think that the architects, who are very skilled designers, would have come up with a design that was more interactive with the district had they been required to do so.
Commissioner Jefferson?
So we have two choices. We have A and we have B. We have a negative space. And if we have that negative space, if we have to look at that negative space and say, which one is more interesting? Which one has more architectural drama? Because we have to have A or B. I have to come down with the cantilever because what it does is activates the negative space. And when you look at it further back, you see that you can see other buildings in the back of this. And the negative space kind of is obscured and opens up with the other buildings. So if you have to think about it in terms of negative space versus solid space, a small cantilever makes it more interesting for me.
So Commissioner, I just want to emphasize, and maybe you're saying this and I'm not quite understanding it. The issue is really if you're saying the negative space and its relationship to the landmark buildings, that's sort of the. So in your view, the adding the cantilever is sort of sympathetic to or enhances the architectural features of the buildings?
Building and the space.
Thank you.
Commissioner Tumbe?
I guess I'm going to focus on this one as a one-off, and in particular because of the irregular shape of the district itself. And as was stated prior, I believe those boundary lines should be looked at with a little more scrutiny in the future. But based on this incident, I do not find the cantilever to really make a negative impact on the portion of the landmark district that is being shown here today.
Commissioner Wilder?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting application, and mainly due to the district lines, especially how they're situated on this block in particular. I think if there was an issue, it would be the issue of the actual building and not necessarily the cantilever, in my opinion. Because, and I don't know this, but the billboard is probably more distracting than the cantilever. I don't know if that was approved or how it got there or when it got there. And because of its relationship to the building's roof and the cantilever, probably twice the size of the building from the ground. In my opinion, I don't think that there's a relationship. I think these two buildings actually sandwiching the buildings that are in the historic district actually bring more attention to it, and I don't think that attention is impacted by the cantilever. So now, if the cantilever was different location, lower, I don't know how I would feel. But I think the applicant was very strategic in how they set up their images, especially going through the exercise of showing what the building would be if they didn't do the cantilever. We can question all day whether we think it's necessary. It doesn't, I didn't obviously do the numbers, so I don't know whether it's necessary from an economic standpoint or necessary at all. But the fact that they did it and it's in front of us, I'm just looking at it as I don't think that it's inappropriate. So I can find it appropriate.
Thank you. So I'm going to give my opinion here since we're not going to have enough votes for a decision today. I think looking at this image, the cantilever doesn't cause me any issues with the historic buildings, and so I can find it appropriate. I don't think it affects them in a negative way, and I think the facade is nicer with the cantilever. However, we only have 5 votes, so we're going to take no action today, and I guess bring this back when we have the other 3 commissioners here to, what?
We don't have 6. You have to have 6 to act, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you.
Right. We'll now move to the next and final item of the day. That's public hearing item 13, LPC 25-07016. An application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, Block 474, Lot 19, 41 to 43 Mercer Street in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. This is a store and storehouse building that's number 43, designed by Henry Fernbach and built in 1868, and a one-story garage, number 41, This application is to demolish the garage, again, that's number 41, and to construct a new building, to remove the party wall and combine the buildings, and replace storefront infill and construct rooftop and rear yard additions at number 43.
Good afternoon, Commissioners and Landmark staff. My name is Alexander Neratov, and I'm the architect for this project. I've been learning from and enjoying Soho facades for my entire professional life, 45 years living and working on Prince Street in Soho. This project grew out of the 2021 Soho NoHo rezoning, a process I was involved with representing the Soho loft tenant and artist communities. Our goal was to create a facade reflecting in its details an analysis of Soho's architectural and social history, but matching the proportions of the classic Soho facade while distributing the floor area allowed by the rezoning so as not to damage the scale of this single-focus cast iron historic district. Our goal was to stay within the 6 to 7 story scale of Central Soho, to shift the extra bulk to the existing 4-story structure at 43 Mercer, sending it back beyond visibility from the street. And making sure that our addition would not exceed the height of buildings on Green Street behind us. And allow me to introduce our preservation consultant, Jackie Pudevallen.
Hello, Commissioners and Landmark staff. Thank you for hearing this application today. My name is Jackie Pudevallen, JPD Preservation Consulting. 41 and 43 Mercer stand on the west side of the street between Grand and Broome. 41 Mercer is the 1-story garage. It was previously, my apologies, we're missing slides. 41 Mercer is a 1-story garage. It was previously a 4-story building, which I'll explain in greater detail later. For now, we ask that the commissioners note that the existing garage is not architecturally significant. 43 Mercer to the right of the garage, which you can sort of see in this image here, is presently a 4-story building with an altered base, and it has been greatly altered over time in terms of its massing. 43 Mercer was originally a 2.5-story federal house on a raised basement. It originally had a pitched roof, so the 3rd floor was expanded and the 4th floor was added. 43 has also been extended at the rear. It's almost its rear lot line. Oh, bizarre. So here's some views showing you the view corridor that exists from Broadway. That's created by this Jean Nouvel building here on the corner. And you can see from Broadway that there is limited visibility looking at 43 Mercer. In this image here, you can see the red brick of 43 Mercer's facade, and what the massing is beyond it is the buildings that face onto Green Street behind it. Here's another illustration of that view corridor from Broadway. And on these historic maps, we're showing you the evolution of this block over time. In the 1850s, most of the block was still single-family houses in the Federal and Greek Revival styles. These houses were the first types of buildings constructed in the area in the 19th century, early 19th century, following a wave of development that happened after the War of 1812. Change came quickly, and by the 1860s, the early houses were being replaced by loft buildings or converted to commercial use. By 1900, the entire block had been built out, which you see in the center map, loft buildings having replaced most of these houses. The commercial character of the district was present by the 1870s, with store and loft buildings for light manufacturing defining the streetscape. Going left to right, you're seeing the 1940s tax photos for 41 and 43 Mercer. On the left is 41 Mercer, before it was replaced by the 1-story garage that's there presently. In the 1860s, in the 1860s, the house that was at 41 Mercer was demolished, and replaced with a 4-story, full-depth building. And then that was later enlarged in 1921 with a partial 5th floor. And in the 1940s, it was subsequently demolished and replaced with the 1-story garage that's there now. In the middle is 43 Mercer. The house at 43 Mercer was enlarged vertically and horizontally in 1869 to a 4-story, presumably factory building. In the photo on the left, you can see the masonry. You can see in the masonry the outline of the original profile of 43 Mercer, including the sloped roof that was at the 3rd floor and the 2 original chimneys. You can also see that outline in the black and white designation photo. The original house that was probably much like the houses that were standing nearby on Prince Street in 1819, here in this bottom right photo. In the drawings of the lots in the map details above, you can see that 43 Mercer was originally a one-family house with a rear extension. By 1900, the building is noted as being 4 stories with a 3-story rear addition that extends almost to its rear lot line. These building sections show how 43 Mercer has already been greatly altered over time. On the left is its original volume. This is somewhat conjecture based on evidence on the building and the footprint of the rear addition that's in the 1857 map. In the middle is the section from the 1860s alteration, enlargement, and on the right, we're showing you where floors were replaced in the 1940s. That's the only difference in that section. In the early 20th century, it was common to find resident artists and real estate speculators constructing studio windows and even full-floor atelier additions on buildings in Greenwich Village to the south of this district. We have a number of those examples in the appendix. Less common, but still present in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District, here are 2 examples of atelier floors being added with studio windows sloping back just behind the cornice of these buildings. These are 550 Broadway on the left and 400 West Broadway on the right. 550 Broadway's studio addition was present in the early 20th century, and the addition at 400 West Broadway was built prior to designation. There is precedent in the district for the approval of large rooftop additions. On the left is 38 Green Street, approved in 2016. In the middle is a new building that was approved at 107 to 111 Green Street with a 2-story rooftop addition and bulkhead. And on the right is the 9-story addition that was approved at 277 Canal, a former theater building. We have many more examples of similar additions in the district that were approved in the appendix. Just a few doors down is 53 Mercer, a low-scale building from the mid-19th century. In 2022, an approval was issued for a 2-story, 21-foot tall rooftop addition with bulkhead on top of a 3-story, 37-foot tall building. The 2nd story of the addition was shown to be partially visible from the south on Mercer. The findings in the certificate of appropriateness include, quote, that earlier residential buildings were typically converted and expanded as the neighborhood became a commercial hub, and the proposed addition will be consistent with these expansions that characterize this historic district, reflecting the area's layers of development and mixed use, and that the scale and stepped massing of the proposed rooftop addition and bulkhead will be set back from the primary and rear facades and therefore will maintain a sense of the building's original massing, that the materials of the proposed rooftop addition, including gray aluminum cladding and glass railings, will be consistent with the materiality of various visible rooftop structures and installations in the historic district. We believe much of the content of these findings is applicable to our project. Here are some examples of new buildings approved in the district, all with variations on trabeated facades. As you all know, there have been many new buildings approved in this district. And here are some new buildings that were approved nearby on Mercer Street. This is 151 Mercer. In the middle is 44 Mercer, the Jean Nouvel building, basically across the street from our site, and 72 Mercer Street. And with that, I would like to introduce the architect again, Alexander Neratov.
So, Alexander Neratov, Commissioners again. So the existing facade dates from the late 40s, has no historic features on 41 Mercer. We've chosen to use a 4-bay model, modeled after the slender 25-foot 4-bay cast iron facades, of which there were 9 in my count in Soho, but also preserving a ghost of the 1860s 4-bay facade that 41 Mercer used to be. The property is just 50 feet deep. It will be built full from the 1st to the 6th floors, with a 7th floor recess by 15 feet and a small penthouse above. The cellar is existing. It was filled in the 40s, which we're reopening today. I would like to talk about the cast iron facade in general. The Soho Cast Iron Historic District is the only district in New York that is defined by the style it preserves. Soho facades were originally designed to sell the building's occupants as sophisticated, stylish, and successful purveyors of good taste. The look was a European marble palace, but built as cheaply and quickly as possible. This was a post-Civil War real estate boom. The innovation of the Soho facade is to use an industrially produced stone substitute attached to a cheap and conventionally built shell. Soho facades frankly expressed their functional and marketing goals. Windows were the cheapest type, double hung, to provide size on a budget. Floor heights were adjusted to allow maximum sunlight penetration needed for high-end manufacturing. The pressure to increase window sizes required an equivalent reduction in solid materials, forcing an evolution from the classical imitative styles that had their own solid to void limits to styles that allowed thinner columns. Gothic had Judd Foundation on Spring and Mercer on the upper right, naturalistic or eclectic at 550 Broadway, and many others. Eventually, the solid portion was reduced to what may be a Soho invention, the cast-on pilaster, where style was reduced to a repetitive industrialized element, classical in section, but devoid of three-dimensionality, cutting the cost of casting, containing its cultural message in the edge profile, not much more than a single line drawn by 2 intersecting surfaces. This very modern concept is what we built on to create our contemporary model. Floor heights expressed functions and becoming shorter towards the top in spec buildings. Specialized buildings in Soho had occasionally tall second floors for showrooms, or top floors after passenger elevators made those floors more accessible. A modern example of unequal floor heights expressing tall living rooms and shorter bedrooms was approved in 2004 at 109 Mercer Street, which is in the appendix number 5. So I recently understood that Ernest Flagg in a Little Thinker building was already looking for a minimal means to express the classical by reducing the corners to 2-dimensional repetitive scrolls. The single shadow line running at the typical Soho pilaster's edge, carrying the classical message, is analogous to modern analytical work such as Noam Gabbo's Cubist heads or Matisse's expressive line drawings. The use of this minimal cultural messaging technique on a facade scale is reminiscent of Soho's public art of the 60s and 70s. Our facade comments on its context the way Forrest Meyer's The Wall does so well. I will show later in the presentation how this connects with Soho's Golden Age choreographers, with Trisha Brown's work on top, and composers. So this is what we actually did. We deconstructed the Soho facade into a single fin whose edge profile represents the scanned profile of 4749 Mercer, adjusted to our scale, reprising the edge of the Soho pilaster. We would then reassemble those fins manufactured off-site in solid aluminum into a double fin pilaster system following the classic proportions of a Soho building, reflecting Mercer Street's context, including its sawtooth scale and details, second floor balconies and railing details. This methodology allowed us to mimic the cast iron system, also off-site manufacturing, reassembled on-site into a classic facade. In our version, seams and connectors will be exposed and visible and the aluminum will be painted, as was the cast iron. Columns and bases will be constructed of horizontal elements that could offer variations on a theme. Horizontal strips will span the width at each floor, reprising another Soho look. Some fins will be backed by transparent glass strip, others will be solid. Mercer Street was also known for its concentration of modern dancers, and one of the things that I noted that when I was designing this was Steve Paxton, who died when I was designing this facade, has, in his work, Goldberg Variations, which was based on a theme and variations. The theme was, in our case, would be the two solid pilasters that we're putting in the little insert, which is the 43 Mercer facade. And then the variations would be 30 columns. Just so happens that we have 5 columns per floor times 6 is 30. So this memorializes Steve Paxton in a sense. But the solid column in 43, which is on detail on the right, the dimension of that fits exactly into the hollow space of the columns on 41 Mercer. So again, illustrating this theme and variations concept. The windows are a modern aluminum-clad wood variation on a double-hung window with unequal height sash, lowering on bedroom floors and lifting at living rooms to create 6-foot opening heights. And here we can see in the living room, the sash that lifts behind the solid portion of the facade to create a outdoor balcony effect for those floors. The first floor, the columns have filled in with glass, and so they memorialize the glass garage door, which occupied that space for the past 40 years, at least 40 years. And so altogether, this is what this facade would look like, with the hollow columns at 41 Mercer, the solid pilasters in 43, and we'll go back to 43 in a minute. The store entrances, residential entrance, the ADA platform, a fire escape balcony connected to the adjacent building, which is something that was typical in Soho of connected cooperating factory buildings which had horizontal fire escape extensions. And there's also, on the fire escape and the balcony, we're using a Mercer Street detail of alternating wiggle and straight bars, which I've only seen on Mercer Street in the next block in the Spring to Prince block. And again, we just going through the looks of how these second floor and up, the architraves are solid, but you can see they're attached to the fronts of each fin, and the space behind is hollow. And details of how this assembles into this deconstructed version of the classic Soho facade, reduced to horizontal and vertical elements. Renderings inserted into the site. We'll talk about the 43 in a second. On the left, 41 Mercer, 6-story. On the right, the 4-story building at 43, with the atelier window added to that. Views from the street, from a little further away. It's the Mercer Street scale, as if it was originally intended, and again, a more distant view from the north. Now to 43 Mercer. So there are very few buildings such as 43 Mercer left in Soho. The mid-19th century development boom resulted in a disappearance of almost all the residential row houses. This low rise brick building is a background building in this uniquely thematic cast iron district. The facade was almost certainly replaced during the extensive enlargement in 1869. I think it probably failed, and that's where they put in the curved arch lintel. Once the cast iron development boom was over, having missed this building, it would have been logical to expect an artist's atelier to be added, in the same way that 550 Broadway was enlarged with an atelier sometime after its cast iron conversion in 1900. Many similar buildings in Greenwich Village were developed with such ateliers over brick buildings. So this floor is intended to be perceived as if it was a 1900 to 1910 addition, becoming part of the historic volume. 41 Mercer was enlarged with a partial fifth floor in the early 20s. Enlargements did happen in Soho. At 550 Broadway, mentioned before, and I counted 8 other Soho sites on a quick search that had enlargements of either 1, sometimes to 5 or 6 stories. The atelier's main function, therefore, was to increase the scale of what would be perceived as old mass and mask the addition of setback upper floors. I broke the upper floors up into different materials, using brick at the 6th floor to trick the eye into thinking that this is part of a Green Street building. It's only seen at 270 feet away from Broadway from essentially a fixed vantage point. And above that, I used iconic materials and shapes at the 7th floor in the bulkhead, such as one sees but never acknowledges above the Soho rooftops, the water towers, using vertical wood boards, and the steel trusses supporting them. At that distance, a Soho accustomed eye might dismiss them as secondary technical superstructures, like an invisible kabuki theater stagehand in the bottom right. And this recently built 2-story metal-clad enlargement of 38 Green will provide a solid background to 43 Mercer's addition from the Broadway vantage point. So the result in sections, this is 43, the original red profile of the house, enlarged, more than doubled in 1869. And now the addition that we're doing on 43, adding 2 floors and a penthouse seen from the front. From the back, the building is only 3 stories high, and I'm fitting in a mezzanine, so it's actually looks like more floors in there. Again, looking the other way with the Green Street buildings behind. The facade of 43 Mercer. The post-World War II look of this facade had a single garage door for laundry trucks. I'm reprising this opening by the new facade design, and even its divisions at the upper level reminiscent of a garage door. The glass we measured is not the widest, even by late 19th century standards. And in an appendix, we show a dozen storefronts that are actually wider than this. Details of the facade, the arch lintel that was exposed in 1947, and which we will keep exposed, and the brick below the arch is infill from 47. That will be removed, replaced with glass and storefront. Details of which here are some 400 Broadway and some examples on Spring Street and some modern examples of storefronts that were approved by the commission in the past 20 years. And so what we're going to have is 2 solid pilasters with solid material, sort of modern material above, with the arch lintel above that. And so here's some more renderings of 43 on the right, 41 on the left. A relationship, but not repetition, change of color, corresponding details, some continuing across and others unique to 43. Looking above at the setback addition of the 6th and 7th floors. The drone's eye view of what it looks like from above. Again, you only see 41 from the street, 43 you only see from 270 feet away on Broadway. More of that. Look, the addition of 43 is metal clad behind the front. And so here you see the existing facade, which is we're not touching, except the opening of the cellar. A bit more was filled in, I think, in 1990. And everything is above the brick that is new, that's set back, 20-foot setback in the back with metal clad addition. 3 dimensions, that's the metal addition above the brick. Documenting existing roof in the back, existing 4th floor, which occupies half the 43 Mercer's depth. The roof, the front of the roof today, or before today, and recently we put the mock-up, so I'm documenting the mock-up location. We mocked up the only the 5th floor because the back of it, which again is not visible because it'll be blocked by the new building in 41. The building really couldn't carry even addition of a mock-up because that exposed south wall of 43 is kind of precarious. So the red portion is actually all you'll ever see, except at the narrow slot from Broadway, the 270 feet away. So again, mock-up and corresponding rendering. And from the south, and from further away. This is what you see from Broadway. Trees and a glass wall obscure what is an unfortunate gap in Soho's streetscape. On the left is what you see, which is primarily the buildings along Green Street. And on the right is our proposal, which does not take up any more sky than the existing additions because of the solid buildings behind it. Some different seasonal views. Winter, obviously, you see more, but you still have trees in front. And summer, you see absolutely nothing. And these are, again, fully rendered views of the visible portion of the building from Mercer Street sidewalk. Thank you, commissioners.
Do any commissioners have questions? I don't see anyone in the room for hearings, so Elizabeth Lee, do we have remote? Please follow through with that.
Those joining via Zoom who wish to speak, please use the raise hand function. You'll be promoted to panelist, after which we ask you to unmute, state your name for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. The first speaker will be Emma Bartley.
Hello, this is Emma Bartley, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Historic Districts Council. HDC appreciates the thoughtful effort to design a new infill building that responds to the scale and rhythm of the district. We find the proposed height and massing are generally appropriate, but question some details. Namely, we find the rear facade's materiality and fenestration to be inconsistent with the historic building and district. The rear facade should be constructed in brick rather than stucco to better reflect the historic character of the building type, and the fenestration should be more uniform to align with traditional patterns found in the district. While overall we are supportive of the project, we recommend the rear facade's design elements be further studied. Thank you.
The next speaker will be John Graham.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. John Graham for the Victorian Society, New York. The proposed new building at 41 Mercer is, in broad outlines, a comfortable and appropriate fit for the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. The height, scale, massing, proportions, details, and to an extent the materials are contextual and appropriate. However, we see some flaws. For a building that tries so hard to be contextual, the windows are a false note. Their configuration should be more typical of historic windows in the district. Also, the storefront needs to have bulkheads, rather than having the glazing go down to the sidewalk. More importantly, however, we believe the design of the steel framework for the facade is fatally flawed. It surely is a clever take on cast iron fronted buildings, but it will become a pigeon hotel. The recesses at the first floor will become trash receptacles. It will be very difficult to keep clean and to paint. Steel rusts far more quickly and seriously than cast iron. It might be said that the owner should be free to create his own maintenance headache if he wants to, but the effect is likely to be an eyesore or a rapid return to the commission with design modifications. Concerning number 43, we think the proposed rooftop addition is far too tall, doubling the height of the building. A cacophony of designs is proposed, a different one for each floor of the addition. They do not relate well to each other or to the historic building below. Thank you, Commissioners.
The next speaker will be Pete Davies.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Pete Davies. I live nearby the proposed location at 4143 Mercer in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District, and I support this creative application. I particularly appreciate the way the design for the new structure at 41 Mercer is offering varied floor heights. It's an element found in historic cast iron buildings throughout Soho, but that height variation brings a subtle rhythm to the building, giving a facade a visual musicality, which the architect referred to in his presentation. That liveliness isn't found in many of the more recent ground-up construction in Soho, where instead many newer developments rise without any variation, resulting in buildings that are inappropriately inert. In contrast, what is presented for 4143 Mercer fits the context of our unique and fantastic Soho landmarked historic neighborhood. Also commendable are the individual design details for the distinct facades, which offer an appropriate interplay between the two lots at 41 and 43 Mercer. The distinctive fire balcony sharing forms found in other buildings within the district is also an appropriate connector between the two components. The additional structure to be added up top uses historic forms seen on nearby rooftops and does not impose on the neighboring buildings. This proposal for 4143 Mercer is a well-done contextual addition to the Soho Cast Iron Historic District, and I urge the Commissioners to approve this plan. Thank you for your consideration.
The next speaker will be Thomas Rochon. Thomas, you are muted.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, my name's Tom Rochon. I live at 100 Grand Street, right behind or in front of 41 Mercer Street. And I've been here since 1976, 50 years, and I've had my bedroom windows on that particular lot line. So I totally have to oppose this construction because of that, number one. Number two, I can't understand why the building department will allow a fire escape on the exterior of the building for an egress of a building built twice as big as the existing one. And three, the bulk of the building is way too high. My building is 86 feet high, and they're going up to something like almost 90 feet to 100 feet with swimming pools and other stuff on the roof. I don't know if we need that in Soho. And thanks for listening to me.
Could I join in with Tom's statement? My name is Bill Young, and I moved in the 80s. I happen to be an artist with a choreographer, so I was pleased to see the references to Trisha Brown and Steve Paxton. The thing that isn't addressed so much as facade is the sense of appropriateness of what is between the buildings, sometimes called a donut, just the space of Soho as a neighborhood. Now that it's been converted from commercial buildings built in commercial zoning to trying to be a residential place, still living with those commercial lot lines. And the truth is that to have a 10-foot backyard where there's another set of windows looking into the windows that are the only windows, the proper windows at the back of our building, will almost make a travesty of the concept of light and air, because both will be eliminated completely for what are now residential zoning. We can't cut off our building and put a backyard in, but the commission does, or at a later point in time, if someone chooses to use a lot line to kill what light and air has existed for 80 years or more, it seems almost like the buildings as they are now were built together at the same time in 1868. I know at one point there was a bridge between them, between 43 and 100 grand. And the back goes down so that there is light and air for 100 grand. This going so high with the additional massiveness on the roof is going to completely eliminate our light or air. Maybe that's not appropriate for this conversation, but I think it is addressable to the appropriateness of what kind of neighborhood, kind of coordination of different buildings with different styles. In other words, considering Soho not as just a building as just an individual item, but how it fits in and affects the neighborhood adjacent to it. And I thank all of you for listening to our words.
Anyone else who wishes to speak, please use the raise hand function.
I see.
Sean Sweeney, I saw that your hand came up. If you'd like to speak, please accept this invitation to be promoted to panelists.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes. Yeah, my name is Sean Sweeney. I've lived in Soho since '77 as well. I chaired the Landmarks Committee of Community Board 2 for 24 years. I'm still on it, as a matter of fact. And I'm the director of the Soho Alliance, which was a successor to the Soho Artists Association. And I'm only going to talk about the gap between the north side of the Jean Nouvel building on Grand and Broadway and how it could affect the view of a pedestrian on Broadway that might happen to see this rooftop addition from Broadway. If you remember, it's always been the prerogative of the commission to eliminate gaps, but for some reason, because Jean Nouvel, he never explained why, back in 2005 when this came up, why he needed that gap. So I think it was because he was a star architect and the commission didn't just went along with it, to be quite honest. So if it wasn't for that, this gap should never exist, and therefore this view would never have been seen, won't be seen from Broadway. And even more ironic, the Soho Alliance helped get trees legalized in Soho. For Mr. Nouvel, the Landmarks didn't want trees. They said there were no trees in the 19th century, which later we proved them wrong. Yet they approved trees for Jean Nouvel, but not for the community, the people who lived here. So let's just regard entirely the fact that we can see that rooftop addition from Broadway, because that gap should never be there, and that view should never have been visible. Thank you very much.
Anyone else who wishes to speak, please use the raise hand function. Seeing none, I'll note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 recommends mixed approval of the facade and over-design of 41, and the facade and extensions of 43, but denial of the pilasters with glass windows. They recommend to be replaced with pilasters identical to the solid examples elsewhere in the facade, and denial of the ground floor infill at 43, and suggests that the infill be framed in wood with substantial bulkheads. In addition to Manhattan Community Board 2, 6 individuals recommend approval.
Turned it off. Would you like to respond to any of the comments?
But just one correction, the facade is aluminum, not steel. So it's going to be painted. I don't expect any, therefore, rust. Aluminum oxidizes very slowly. But it's, in a sense, has the same kind of deterioration speed as cast iron. Most of the lots between the horizontal members and the facade are pretty small. I don't expect birds to be able to get in there. We kind of measured the slots pretty carefully. And behind is a shallow hollow space filled in with some solid material, so I don't think we'll have nesting problems. And the bases are raised up off the ground, so I don't think that's a garbage collection, but I do expect the store occupants to take good care, not allow the garbage to accumulate. And I think that's probably all the comments.
Hi, Jackie Prudu-Vallon again. There were comments regarding the neighbors' windows and proximity of the new building to windows. I know I don't need to remind the commissioners that it's not within the commission's purview to regulate private views, but I feel I need to say it anyway. Regarding the space behind these buildings in general, there was reference made to the donut. There really is no donut. All of these buildings are, they were changed or built for manufacturing, and they're all pretty much to the rear lot lines, and it's quite crowded back there. So there's not a lot of light in there back there to begin with. Not that that's within your purview either. Regarding the height of the rooftop addition, so that's really the elephant in the room. Normally, myself as a preservationist who went to school just because I love staring at old buildings, I would normally feel uncomfortable with that, but for the fact that this is a building that's already so substantially changed over time. 43 Mercer began its life as a 2.5-story building on a raised basement. It was a federal row house. It's already had basically 2 floors added to it. The rear facade that's there is not the original rear facade. It's entirely built out in the back. So we can't say that there's a rear facade, even a top floor rear facade, that's remaining as a precious element that needs to be preserved. This is a building that's completely changed from what it was originally. So for that reason, and the fact that the rooftop addition, in my opinion, would really blend in with the rooftop accretions, the rear facades of other buildings that are visible from that very narrow corridor on Broadway, I personally feel okay with the rooftop addition. And I personally also like it that the architect took pains to try to articulate each floor in a very different way so that it would create this trompe-l'oeil effect, this trick of the eye, so that when you're looking at it, you're not really focusing on, oh, that's one solid structure that's above another solid structure. Instead, it's broken up so that you won't really recognize it for what it is if you happen to be looking through a narrow corridor from all the way on Broadway. Let me see if there's anything else I want to say. Oh, one other issue was brought up, pigeon nesting on the facade. They're already in talks with consultants about specifically prevention of pigeon nesting, and the architect has already taken pains to space certain elements of the design so that would be prevented. But if you have questions on that, we should address that as well. Thank you.
Any questions, commissioners?
Maybe I missed this. Is each floor height different, or they're all the same height in 41?
The floors are different. The 3rd floor is shorter because it has bedrooms. behind it. And so is the fifth floor. So yes, there is a variation in the heights, and they express really the functions behind them. The tall floors are the living rooms, the shorter floors are the bedrooms. And
the 40 and 43, the floors are all connected, right? So the
well,
floors are
the
connected.
fifth floor, the atelier window is for a living room for a unit behind. And then the sixth and the seventh are a duplex with the little penthouse. So it's actually a triplex apartment.
Thank you.
Any other questions, commissioners?
Just out of curiosity, since you mentioned the pigeon control, what specific are you thinking of deploying?
Well, it's really preventing the birds from getting in the slots, in the horizontal slots. It would be probably impossible to have pigeons stop sitting on the tops of horizontal elements, but they occur everywhere. And frankly, it hasn't really been a problem in this neighborhood. So what we focused on is preventing to create sort of enclosed spaces, and under the cornices slope out again, so the horizontal edges don't really offer a good perch for a bird. And the inside of the cornice is solid, except for a shallow space behind the visible surfaces.
Yeah, of course, Commissioner Jefferson.
In terms of the abstract elements on 41, 41, right? How many elements are there? There are three types, right? There is the solid, and then there's the linear elements. Am I correct? There are two?
Well, there are pairs of fins. Each fin is profiled after this classical edge of a sofa building. So a double fin makes a hollow pilaster. So there are 5 these double pilasters going up. And then on the surface of each pilaster, we attach horizontal strips going from lot line to lot line. And they're the ones that make the architraves and the cornices.
Could you go back to the image of the abstract image that you had way back before? I'm curious about how the elements are made.
Which ones, for instance, we have to go all the way forward? Go all the way. Is this like this, for instance?
Frank, so some of them are open, like on the left-hand image, the corner one is solid, right? There's a plane in the back. One to the left, that's open with glass. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, some of the pilasters have a glass infill.
Okay.
Others are solid. The glass infill corresponds to when there's a space behind it. If there's a solid infill, there's a partition behind it. So in the case of a floor where there is a large space, like on the top floor, all the pilasters are glass. Same thing on the first floor. They're all glass, reminiscent of the glass-filled garage door that's been there since the 1970s.
So could you go back to the facade, that the final facade of the drawing itself, the complete facade? Okay. Got it. Thank you very much.
Okay, Commissioner Chen, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Commissioner Goldblum, would you second it?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Commissioner Jefferson, can you start our discussion, please? You're up to it.
Rahul, use that language. I can approve this, and I think there are parts of it that are incredibly ingenious and fascinating to me, which is the abstract sculpture of the facade, and a bit concerned last night with the floor heights, and I didn't quite understand the concept of that in terms of the historic district, because typically they're all the same height, and why the change. And I have some question about that. The other building, 43, I thought the addition was just too high for me. I thought it was just the number of floors and the massing of it. And I understand the idea of the facades changing as you move back. I understand the concept of that and not visible. But I wasn't quite sure if it really kind of came together properly. But you didn't see it, but architecturally I did see it. So did it hold together? And then the back facade, I think the back facade was not a thought through as the 41. Is it 41? Yeah. Because it needed a bit more work. So that's where I stand. I think on a whole, the concept of the whole idea of these two buildings and how they're put together, I think it's marvelous. I just need a bit more refinement in terms of the 43 and the back facade and the height.
Thank you. Commissioner Tumbe?
Yes. Overall, I find the approach to be very interesting, especially abstracting a cast iron facade and trying to reimagine it and come up with the new kit of parts. I do find it interesting. To say that I'm not convinced about the varying floor heights, so I think that should be reinvestigated. I do appreciate how it talks to the storefront of 43. I think that's a nice gesture, but I believe some of the detailing of the storefront can be added to it a bit. For 41, just as the facade sits, the railing at the second floor, I don't see how it really is integrated into the facade of 41. I see that it's connected to the fire escape of 43. I don't know if that is the best move to actually make. As it stands for 43, I appreciate the studio addition. Once we go past that, I get overwhelmed. And I'm not sure if that's the best way to look at it. And likewise, for 41, I believe the addition is one story too many. Overall, I think it's a very nice concept. And I can tell that thought was taken into composing this based off of what the existing site was. I guess furthermore, I would like to speak to the rear facade of 43. I don't believe it properly integrates into what is being presented, and it maybe it could be tweaked a bit.
Commissioner Wilder?
Excuse me. Yeah, quite unique and interesting project. I didn't know where the applicant was going upon looking at everything initially. I even like this image here of the rendering. I think overall maintaining 43 and adding to it, I can see how it could have been a challenge trying to figure out what the design of the new building would be. And so I commend the applicant on kind of finding a contemporary way to maintain the Soho style and reimagine all of the details and how it kind of infills in this block. I also found it, I don't know if it's good or bad, just this image being misleading with the amount of things that are happening above the roof with the roof additions. I know they're not visible from here, but I think Commissioner Jefferson mentioned something about architecturally how it looks and feels. So I'm kind of on the fence about how appropriate it is. It's just it feels like a different project in a sense from the facades at the street. I think as also I think the rear facade, they didn't receive as much attention as the front. I think there can be some work to improve that relationship. I found it quite challenging, a project to kind of fully digest and kind of pick apart. But I think if I'm just taking it at face value, looking at the new building and its relationship to the block and the existing building as well, I think overall I can find appropriate, but I do think that there needs to be some tweaks in those areas. And I don't know if the floor-to-floor height adds anything to it. So I can see how it takes away. So I would probably want to not have differing floor-to-floor heights. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
No, your turn, Commissioner Mahan.
Thank you for the presentation. So Mr. Naritoff's knowledge of Soho architectural and cultural history is formidable. And I appreciated all of the cultural references made throughout to architecture, to dance, music, and so forth. But there are simply too many ideas in this project. It lacks clarity. I think that's a kind of an overarching comment about both sites, sort of, and really all aspects of them. A few more specific items, the facade of 41, took up maybe the lion's share of the discussion. I understand it's a kind of contemporary riff, on historic cast iron, profiles and detailing, as we've seen elsewhere, in historic districts, including, this one. That being said, I can't say that I'm particularly persuaded by this contemporary interpretation. I don't understand the significance of the source material, and I find the contemporary output to not be as beautiful. I mean, frankly, as I think that we might wish it to be. That is, one of the I think kind of criteria for all of the sort of abstraction that we can make from historic references to a kind of contemporary interpretation, that ends up still nonetheless being the bottom line. I think the facade of 41 suffers from other sort of issues relative to proportion, floor to floor height. There's an awful lot going on with it, that variation and the variation of solid versus opaque pilasters. Windows open up and down, and there's a balcony. So quite a lot happening there. I think once we get to the roofscapes, let's say, which I think in this instance includes the top few floors of both buildings, I think there's too much of it, and there's too much going on. It's several different projects in one. the rear facade needs to be completely rethought. It doesn't belong in this historic district. So, the breadth of cultural references and the effort to make them contemporary is very admirable, much appreciated, and I think, the right way to approach a contemporary building in a historic district. But, I think the project could benefit from a significant editing effort.
Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I think Commissioner Mayhem touched on this. I think it's commendable that you, by the way, it's a very interesting presentation. I like the incorporation of the other cultural elements and given the context and history of this district. I think what's been touched upon obviously is that some of the floor-to-floor height ratio, whether you want to go back and respect the historic pattern of this area, the varying of floor-to-floor height, the use of the bulkhead on 43, and then as other commissioners, the members have alluded to, whether, the addition on the rooftop and some of the other details are not quite there yet. So I see the attempt. I think what you're trying to, make references to the thing, but I think there is a bit of a mixed message, for lack of a better word. And I think that to tighten it up on a refinement may be worth taking a look.
Commissioner Goldblum?
Okay. I agree with a lot of what's been said so far, so I'll try not to repeat too much. 43, storefront should have a bulkhead. The garage idea doesn't really read. I think it's a very conventional storefront as it's designed, and as such, it should be a little bit more conventional by having the bulkhead. I don't think that's the case for 41. We've seen a number of Soho cast iron buildings that have the full height windows in those narrow metal framed bays, and I think that there's a certain logic to it. But in the brick building, I think it's not working. I do share the pigeon concern, and I think the applicant should work with the staff to kind of integrate that into the project. You'd hate to see this lovely, interesting building grow prickles by the yard, which is probably what it would have to do either on day 1 or on day 5. And I remember we had a presentation from BKSK a number of years ago where the designer was incredibly proud of the fact that he had discovered the exact angle at which pigeons no longer stand on a semi-horizontal surface. So we might want to consult with the records on that. I think that the detailing of the 43 north light needs refinement. I think it's a nice idea. I think it's appropriate, but I do think that the details need to be looked at. And I think part of the problem with I agree with everybody about the rooftop stuff being too much, but we approved a few weeks ago this rather unpleasant modern single-family house conversion of a huge building where the guy felt that there wasn't yet enough space in it, but he needed to add 2 or 3 more floors. And because it wasn't visible except for at a distance, we approved it. And I think that because this is kind of designed so much, it's got so many moves and gestures to it, it's kind of compelling us to look at it, where I think you're better off having us not look at it and making it plainer and kind of simpler and less ideas and, less hubbub. Certainly 1 less floor would be a great thing, as others have said, but I think that we don't want to look at it. We want to just kind of like, all right, it's there, but we don't want to see it. And that's kind of how you feel about roof bulkheads and other rooftop mechanical spaces or even water tanks. You kind of just don't see them, even though you see them. So think about that. I agree with the. I think part of the comments that people had about the rear facade not really being right could be addressed by shifting to brick. which was one of the testimony ideas, which I think was a good one. And in terms of the floor-to-floor height, yeah, the thing that's weird about it is that it goes big, small, big, small. And that's definitely not a Soho thing. It's either all the same or tapering as you go up.
So
I'm just going to add on
Oh,
Commissioner
sorry.
Goldblum's comment because his comment reminds me of the Norwegian Seamen's church on the South Street Seaport, which is in that case was like, it was very, very visible and it's very, very, you're forcing the public to look at it. And so I think that's the inherent balance between which approach you want to take.
Okay, all right, you,
Let's show Ms. Throne's idea with that. We're kind of talking about it, and maybe we should, lighten up on it. It's really. You shouldn't have shown.
right. So we're going to take no action today. I'm going to add a few of my own comments, largely in agreement with my fellow commissioners. So hopefully you can come back and we can approve it. I think the floor-to-floor heights at 41 are weird. As a number of people have said, either they all should be the same or they should shrink as they go up. The balcony on 41 just seems to be out of place. I'd probably cut one floor of the bulkhead of 41, but maybe that's all right. And the same at 43. I also would look at the north light being pulled, or being pulled back a few feet so it's less visible and you can perceive the current facade more readily, and then refine the rear facade. But I think the 41 facade is inventive, and although there are pigeon issues, I can approve that, but I'd like to see the floor-to-floor issue addressed. So I think with that, we're going to conclude our public hearing and public meeting of February 24th. Thank you all for your participation, and we will see everybody in 2 weeks on Tuesday, the 10th, for our next public hearing and public meeting. Thank you.